What's up? What's up? We are live Sunday morning. I am joined by my friend Ethan Indigo, and Ricardo is actually in Wisconsin this week with a unstable connection, so he will be joining us again later. Ethan, go ahead and tell him what you've got going on, what you've been working on.
Well, I've been trying to put together an exploration of a thread within Plato's writing, which will probably be something that I'll find myself in a great deep sea that I can't really swim out of, in the sense that it's just a big rabbit hole, effectively. But I'm exploring the sacred geometry of Plato recently, and I'm going to make a video about it. And that's, of course, I do that I kind of found, at least subjectively, found a thread of the points, lines, planes idea in geometry of meditation that I've been working on and written about. And yeah, besides that, I've been trying to just live the carefree life of just having finished my job and not having too much responsibility, enjoying spring. And yeah, what about yourself?
That's a good. Oh man, not much. I've been battling on Twitter. Obviously, I do that a lot.
Yeah, good. We all got those.
Reading the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Isaiah. So the book of Isaiah might as well be the conspiracy book, Protocols of the Elders of Zion, because when you realize what's going on with prophecy.
Does it precede the Elders of Zion?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Way before. Well, the book of Isaiah is supposed to be in the, early BC periods where they're talking about the future Israel and stuff like that.
So that's really the protocols. But what are the protocols? Is that the same?
Well, it's sort of a dubious book from the 19th century where they're talking about how evil the Jews are, and this is the Jewish plan.
But the Protocols of Isaiah are and the book of Isaiah, that's the same.
Right. I was just making an exaggeration because when you read through Isaiah and what he's saying, it's like, whoa, he's just masking it all by saying it's prophecy, right? So in Isaiah 60:12, he says, all the nations of the world will serve you, and if they don't, they will be utterly ruined. Wait, so everybody's supposed to serve these people? Well, it's a prophecy, so don't question me beyond that. Right? So this is just
what God says. Is it a prophecy or an order?
Exactly. Yeah. So you've got that little, plausible deniability where you're saying, I'm not saying that. God is saying that. So it becomes really easy to do.
Monotheism I give you immense props for exploring monotheism in the way you do, because it's talk about archontic parasitic influence upon humanity. And I say that, but I want to asterisk that by saying that there are such great lessons within even the orthodox monotheist presentations. There are great lessons, but I endorse exploring monotheism as a mental tick because we see where it has led. We now have, apocalyptic pursuers battling over nothing. I mean, right. It's so behind our current war over nothing.
Right. It's really interesting if you just sort of remove all of the elements of the divine and just read it for what it is. Then you get sort of a clear picture. And I think that's what you should do with every holy text, is remove all of the elements of the divine, read it for what it is, because it's within that space between what it is and the divine elements of it that you actually find the truth. It's between those two things. I like to put it this way. Any prophecy that is more than like palm reading or divination of some sort, where it's up to you to determine the meaning, that's called a plan, right? So if it's not open for interpretation by the individual who's given the destiny, then it's really just set in stone and you're making a plan, right? So this is the problem. See, at the Oracle at Delphi, the number one rule is know thyself. You're not going to understand the Oracle that you're given unless you know who you are, right? You've got these two different directions of understanding. You've got to understand the outside world and you've got to understand yourself. And if you don't understand yourself, you're not going to understand the outside world. All of the elements of the world around us are within us. So when you're given direct orders as a prophecy, guess what? That's a plan. That's not a prophecy. There's a difference.
Yeah, well said. And a valuable lesson actually from, I don't know if it's necessarily monotheist, but from a monotheist writing, the Zohar presents the 4 pards, and it's a super valuable tool for interpretation of spiritual lessons. And it's the 4 ways, or it's a set of 4 ways to interpret spirituality, and I think also any allegory or philosophy, for instance, really beyond that. There is the literal interpretation and the allegorical and the comparative and the secretive. And so in interpreting or exploring what the Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, and how it is terming things, you can it's right there. If you just use the 4 pards, which are very much Jewish, but I think are useful beyond just Jewish teachings.
The Zohar, the Zohar is specifically not meant for outside eyes or ears. So,
sure. Well, I think we're very lucky today. This is a distinction of today's time and the information era. Many Buddhist teachings, which were meant to be restricted for a long time, have now been freed to the world, and by direction because of the hostility vis-a-vis China to Tibet. They decided to share all these teachings that were once only to be, communicated from a guru to 2 or 3 disciples or whatever it was. So all these great teachings are now available to us. So there's so much available.
It's the pitfalls and the benefits of living in the Aquarian age, right? Now all the information's out there. Just what can you trust and what is real and what is fake, and it's sort of in that sort of gray space that we sort of find ourselves. Again, very important to know thyself, because if you can't know yourself, then all of this information is just going to steer you wrong, even if it's good information.
Yeah. And it's important to know how much has been scuttlebutted and sidetracked and distorted. It's hard to determine, what has been steered. It's easy to determine maybe what's truthiness, but the truth, that's sometimes really hard to orient with all the steering of things over the centuries and just this last month as it goes.
Oh yeah. Oh, especially now. Now we're getting kicked back into the cave. Every sort of narrative that we get, it's like, get back in there.
Yeah. Well, good lead into what I wanted to talk about, right? So I wanted to talk about something that's brought up often, frequently, actually, the allegory of the cave. And I wanted to just point out that at the basis of the allegory of the cave, there are, in fact, 4 archetypes, if you will, but maybe they might be understood as 4 levels of consciousness, because the allegory of the cave from the Republic is meant to be actually kind of understood with other lessons in the Republic, including the divided line, which is also allegorical for different levels of consciousness. Or it's not allegorical in a sense; it's very literal. But the allegory of the cave, briefly, is used to describe an outside or exoteric state of being. But allegorically, of course, it is our consciousness. And so within the cave, there are the captors who keep people, um, keep their minds busy by presenting shadows along the cavern wall from a fire that is behind them and obviously behind the prisoners. And the prisoners are captivated by the images upon the wall. And this, of course, we can understand as media and government and religion and memes, messaging, all these things that captivate and steer our thinking. Or as I think Nick has mentioned many times, sometimes I trip out on what my neighbor said when I was 8, and how did that steer me? All these things. And the captors use the images on the wall to keep the prisoners. And there are two types of prisoners as it unfolds. There are the shackled captives that are restrained from moving. Excuse me. Because they might still be inspired to move and try to get out of the situation. There are also the unchained captors, and they are so transfixed by the ideation of, say, government and religion or whatever, that they don't even require chains. There's the metaphor of the elephant who grew up in the circus, who had a chain on his foot and learned at a very young age that there was no way that he would ever break that chain. But of course, elephants grow to be unstoppable. But because of that training, the elephant only requires a tiny rope on his foot, and he is defeated from the mental training. So that's very much like the unchained prisoner. So there's the three main characters or archetypes in the allegory of the cave as it unfolds. You have the captor and the chained and the unchained. And then we have the freed prisoner. And the freed prisoner is, as it's told, it's kind of ambiguous if he's dragged or helped or propelled from out of the cave. But basically, life hits him with the proverbial 2x4, and he gets ejected from the cave. And he, on adjustment of his eyesight and or consciousness, realizes that he's in what is a much bigger, broader, real world. And he realizes that I've been a fool. I had no idea I've been lied to. I have to live. And he essentially becomes the poor slave of a poor master. And from the allegory of the cave, I believe we get the sentiment, I'd rather be a poor slave of a poor master than live as they do and think as they do. And that is the people under the belief system of the imagery. So he goes through a certain time period and eventually realizes that he has to go back, and he has to tell people the truth. And they, of course, can't handle it and reject him. And it's kind of left open, I believe, if they kill him or just reject him or whatever, because he cannot see at their level of consciousness, and he's mocked. And this happens, this we see happen a lot. I'm sure, Headless, this has happened to you, where you're on a certain level of the discussion, and the discussion is about here, and they think you're down here, when really you're saying something up here. And you see the whole level of what they think they're seeing and what they're talking about and what you're trying to express, but they think you're down here. Anyway, so reality is mocked, authenticity is mocked. We see this all the time. Thoughtfulness is less popular, but I think it's important and to know those four archetypes of the cave. And a quick comparison in a really modern day literary work that's super influential on the world system, even politics, let alone cultural thinking, is that in 1984 there are four archetypes also, and that is the proles, and these are essentially the ones that require no chains, maybe comparatively. And there's the outer party, and they require chains. And there's the inner party that are the captors, and there is the brotherhood, which are equivalent to the freed prisoner. And so, yeah, interesting phenomenon in 1984 kind of has, the allegory of the cave come to life in Europe, post World War II. And a working title for 1984 was actually The Last Man in Europe. And it kind of beckons to the idea of 1984 too, where you come out of the cave and like, ain't no one trying to hear it, whatever you're saying. And there's also a line in 1984 about stones unheld will drop, water is wet, getting to really basic fundamentals of reality, and 2 plus 2 is 4, gosh darn it, and they can't tell me these lies, something like that. And Matrix of Four, if you look up, I have a pretty extensive article on it. And so, yeah, I think the main idea, I know I'm obsessed with four and everyone gets tired of it, but the main idea is that there are four levels of consciousness, four archetypal modes of thinking. Certainly there are different ways of thinking beyond that, but in the allegory of the cave, there are these four fundamentals that I think are useful for observation and philosophical consideration.
Well, a great example of the duality of the four, or the duality of polarity, is the hero's journey. And I think what you're talking about with the cave is a perfect example. So, at first you're inside the cave, and then all of a sudden you realize the thing that you've been seeing is not the real thing, right? And so you've got to grapple with that. Those are the steps before you go into the unknown. The world of the unknown, in the case of the cave, would be the outside world. Normally what you find in the hero's journey is that they're going into the cave to battle the monster and then come home. But in this case, it's going out of the cave and into this bright, shiny, unknown world that is completely unfamiliar to you, right? And I like this one because it's more of a spiral. Right. But
yeah, well,
every story sort of has those same thematic elements to them. Every sentence is a hero's journey. So it's the narrative arc is one of those things that once you become aware of it, it's something you can't really unsee anymore. It's within every element of our daily lives, and we just sort of pass it over. But it's within that struggle that he has to come back into the cave as a mystic or a knowledge bearer. And as you're trying to, give the knowledge to the people who are also in the cave, it becomes very difficult to finally, get them to see what you're trying to say. It's, what do you do with the knowledge after you have it? What do you do with the torch? Who do you pass it to? That's the real struggle, is because how do you continue that legacy? Because if you've been given the torch and you appreciate the torch, that's your kind of, I guess you would say it's the mystical intervention in your own life, would be that receipt of the knowledge. How is it passed on without being extinguished? Who is the worthy that can appreciate the knowledge that you're giving to them. And that's a whole hero's journey in itself. You've got to let them see and understand from a level that they can see and understand. And like you were saying, when you're talking on two different levels, it becomes very difficult at that point because there's a lot of willful ignorance involved with the hero's journey. You've got to sort of overcome that in yourself and then figure out a way for other people to overcome it as well. And that's the struggle.
Yeah, and that's a dope dual contrast with the coming out of the cave and going back in. That's such a phenomena with all the hero's journey. The archetypal, battling whatever's in the cave. Jesus really had an element of the hero's journey, right? And there is a 4-phase, and this depicts it perfect, Headless. It's a circle, but what happens at the end? Spiral out, ascent. And in the Jesus story, there is birth, life, death, and resurrection. And that happens with all of us, right? As we unfold in this spiral and we come back into the cave and take out the goon, take out the dragon, and try to free people. And then it's, starts again and again. And it's also indicative of that idea of that coming out of the cave is the cave is our very own consciousness, and we come out of it. And how many caverns of consciousness can we proceed to come out of, right?
Right. And if you think about the world from maybe a Platonic perspective, all of the light streaming into the cave, your eyes are projected on the back wall.
Right.
So even at the very most fundamental, there's a cave going on in your head. We live inside the cave, and this is our seat of the consciousness. So maybe what we see can't be trusted either, but I think there has to be that balance between the inner and outer worlds that can be kind of navigated in such a way that is beneficial. And it's within that spiral that you can actually achieve that. Now, how do other people know where you're at in the spiral journey? How do they know what you're saying is correct or what you're saying is false? That's another hero's journey, right? So there's a lot in terms of deception that goes into the hero's journey, because at some level we're always deceiving ourselves about something, right? Whether we know it or not. And
SMS has an interesting comment here, Headless. You might not have seen. You might want to share it. Interesting. Crowley and 1984 won't allow for the individual's contemplation of the number 4. Music usually made with a 4 count. I didn't know that about Crowley necessarily, but in 1984, I think what he or she is talking about is that the book within the book, The Theory and Practice to Oligarchical Collectivism in 1984, does not have a 4th archetype or character. It says overtly there are 3 types of people in the world: the low, the middle, and the high. And we see this trinity, I don't want to say enforcement, but this trinity kind of idealism put forth, and this 4th omission is quite often. And yeah, 4th in Chinese is a homonym with death, and I believe in a couple of other languages in Asia that are similar, they also have such traditions. And even going to the point where, as in the West, we will omit 13 from buildings, and that there's 1 and 3, 4. In the East, the 4th floor will sometimes be omitted. It is also synonymous in ideal for, as we're talking about, this finishing, this completion, this coming around the bend and starting into the next spiraling up. So it is fraught with a lot of power, good and bad, in the East, especially.
Right. There's a certain essence to it that, we want to continue supporting the Trinity, right? The Trinity, the pyramid, the unfinished capstone, that has to continue, right? That's how everything must continue working. If you've completed the square, there's nowhere to go,
Mm.
right?
And that's a
So,
good example of the politics today, because they need to keep the triangular system going, because we could easily flatten out things and make things much more fair, with people being much more happy and still able to pursue things, like, but we could do things without, say, this pyramid system approach. But it seems like they like it.
right. So
Maybe they're
12
stuck
times
in it
12.
too. This like fundamental kind of, they've gotten into this, theoretically, I guess, that we've gotten into this position where we've prevented technology from coming out that would operate more in line with keeping our environment uh, not degraded. And now we've got this whole process of keeping this technology from people, so that big, huge corporations and their people can make money, to where now we're kind of stuck in this cycle, right?
Right. Well, he brings up an interesting point, the four seasons. So, what happens at the beginning of the four seasons? Well, you've got baby New Year. What happens at the end of the four seasons? You've got Father Death, right?
Mm.
And Father Death brings in baby New Year. So, this is the completion of the circle. And it's interesting when you put it in those terms, but they want to avoid that fourth turning at all costs, because that means that's the death of a system. Once it's gone through the cycle, you're returning right back to the start. So the cycles of four, I believe, really have that death connotation. It's a lot less of a square than it is a circle that's bisected.
Right.
The sun wheel again is the circle bisected.
And that's
So
also a variation of the circumpunct. A lot of the Western, the indigenous tribes in the America versions of their circumpunct would have the four-quartered circle variation.
right, and that four-quartered circle, that's the hero's journey as well. Like, you've got
Yes.
the return right there, and it's
Well, and that's a great correlation to that, is really the hero's journey of the Hopi tribe. And they present that circle, right, with the yellow, red, white, and black quarter aspects. And their whole creation story is a hero's journey. They literally say, hey, we're going to explore the earth as four brothers, and then we'll come back together and we'll share all our dope stuff. like
right.
what a great idea it is,
Well, in some ways, four represents satisfaction,
Mm.
right? That's the satisfaction state. And when people reach that four level, they become satisfied with the quarters around them, and you're less likely to have that sort of ambition, because the people in charge have to have the four, right? They have to be in charge of the four corners of the earth, but that's the only way they can be satisfied. For you, you have to constantly be climbing the pyramid, constantly be striving, constantly be achieving, but you're never allowed to return home. Like, that's not part of your journey. So the return trip isn't ever a aspect that they want to give you in terms of community, in terms of legacy, in terms of family. You've got to constantly be striving, constantly trying to achieve on that hamster wheel, watching the shadows, right? That's in a struggle state. You're in a
Yep.
constant struggle state. You can't achieve that satisfaction. It becomes up to the individual at that point to find the satisfaction within themselves, because it's never going to be offered to you. You're only going to be given the Joneses, keeping up with the Joneses. It's funny how that
And
term means, I'm jonesing for something,
I was
right?
gonna
I
say,
think that
right, yeah. Yeah, gosh, I forgot. I was thinking about something, I forgot as soon as I left. Yeah, it's crazy. The United States is a well-off country. Collectively, though, we're all basically on month-to-month work,
Right.
keeping our treading above water, so to speak. The rest of the world is in the same boat or worse. And so, like, what is slavery? Slavery is when you work and get your food and housing and clothing taken care of. You are not excelling. You have
Right.
you have no room, potential to excel. I mean, we have very little room to excel. Often it would appear when everyone is on a month to month kind of do or die situation.
It becomes a flat circle instead of a spiral. Right. The
Right.
spiral is up to the individual. The flat circle is what you're given when you're in a slave situation. It's just you're just following the four quarters of the day and coming right back home and not actually producing anything for yourself, and not actually expanding your consciousness. And slave mentality, I think, is the number one form of slavery that we have today.
Right.
Apart from the, what, 10 million or so? How many slaves do they say exist in the earth that are just being trafficked from one place to the other? It's
I
like
think
10 to 20 million people.
right, more than at any time during the centuries that we think about it as occurring.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not an accident, because we're only told to focus on ourselves. And so I see the world and the government especially as having two faces, right? The front facing face and then the face that's sort of within the background. And the backwards facing face of the government is this sort of underworld of information control, underworld of you know what Congress doesn't want you to know, what the president doesn't want you to know, what the agencies don't want you to know. It's not that hidden, right? But very rarely do we ever see that face. We're only given the public facing view, right? When we actually see that disgusting deep state face, it's usually after a long period of time when the events have actually passed. So it's sort of hidden from view for a time, but then it comes to light at a later date. And what we find too is that there's sort of a two-edged sword to the whole total information awareness state, which is, well, hey, it works both ways. We eventually find out what you guys have been up to. The deep state can't stay hidden forever, but maybe all they really want to do is stay hidden so that you can't stop their next move, right?
Yeah, we're SMS again brings up an interesting point about the fourth turning, which is a kind of series of ideas that all kind of come together, different cycles. I believe. Forgive my shallow knowledge of it, but it's interesting how everything is kind of culminating and shifting. And one big one that's going on right now, it seems to be potentially the disclosure, the UFO disclosure. I just saw right after Trump made his announcement that he's going to disclose things, a week or so, whatever, in between that time and now, which has only been 2 weeks or something. A super, I think he was retired, high ranking general, seemingly has been kidnapped, has disappeared. And his whole thing was, super high tech, potentially alien, having to do with all these type of this stream, if you will, and was mentioned even by. There's that rock star that kind of got into the disclosure process, is kind of really into it. He was mentioned by him as being one of his sources, and now he's gone. Strange.
Right. Well, it's, again, anything that's really important to them, they don't want it getting out right away. So, well, this right here is the Strauss-Howe generational theory, the fourth turning. You would love this book. because it is right up your alley with the fours. It posits that American history moves in 80 to 100-year cycles, a saculum comprising of 4 20-year turnings or seasons. It argues that each generation adopts one of 4 archetypes: prophet, nomad, hero, or artists, which
Wow.
dictate societal responses to crises and awakenings.
This sounds like my obsession for sure.
It really does.
Oh, isn't this like 2 authors put this together though, right? I believe.
Yeah, the Strauss
Yeah,
Strauss Howe
really.
generational theory.
Wow. Yeah, that's really, really amazing.
Right along your line. So a high, a post-crisis period of strong institutions, collective focus, and conformity. Right. So this would be like the good men making, good times. An awakening, a spiritual, cultural, or social uprising against the established order. This would be good times bring about weak men, right? An unraveling, a period of weakened institutions, increased individualism, and distrust. That would be weak men create hard times. And then it's a crisis, a major transformative event, war, revolution that destroys the old order and rebuilds a new one. So that would be back to a high, right? So the weak men creating the bad times brings about good men who create good times, right? So these are the general archetypes. Prophet, baby boomers, born in a high, focused on ideals, moral values, and social change. Nomad, Generation X, born in an awakening, focused on pragmatism, survival, and individualism. A hero, Millennials, born in an unraveling, focuses on community, civic duty, and rebuilding. An artist, the Silent Generation, born in a crisis, focuses on conformity, process, and social care. Now, if you think about it, all they're doing is describing the different ways of teaching your children during these tumultuous times. So, as you're focused on the times around you, that's going to reflect in your parenting style. And that is going to imprint on your children as these generations go forward. So, when they're saying it's overly predictive, it's like divination, but really all they're doing is talking about the parenting styles during these different phases of upheaval and healing and unification, right? So the general theory would hold strong as you're teaching your children how to cope with the changing environment around them. So I mean, really, it's all about parenting styles, but I don't think they get too deep into that in the book. So this is the criticisms. Cyclical history as seen in repeating seasonal patterns where the generations create history and history creates generations. The current cycle, according to proponents in the fourth turning crisis that began around 2008 or 2020. Wow, that's pretty dead on. The theory is often criticized as deterministic, oversimplified, or relying on sweeping generalizations that lack rigorous empirical academic evidence. Now, again, they're not taking the parenting styles of the people who are affected by these crises, but that's to be expected by academics, right? So they're not really looking at how this changes the way that we relate to our children.
It's really amazing that they're putting forth that fundamental and bringing it into a generational observation. It's pretty profound. It's striking too, the generations, how even though of course people are different among a generation, but there are certain elements that are very sticky and they definitely put forth. And yeah, I definitely see behavior models within generational groups. It's maybe now that I'm getting older, I can see that more clearly, or maybe the distinction between generations is so crazy right now. I'm not sure what it is, but I guess, I mean, Generation X is distinct in the sense like there was no technology and then there was. And
Right.
that now there's no more generations since then have kind of grew up without really high tech, if you will. And yeah, baby boomers were told they could do whatever they want. They could have the world. The world is at your fingertips. You can do whatever you want. Generation X was told like nothing. Like literally like do
Well,
whatever. Maybe I guess
it's
was what they.
interesting because baby boomers were the first generation raised on television,
It's a good point.
right? So you've got that whole sort of period of a high being bolstered by the fact that they're only given these shadows on the cave as their information source. This
Right.
is only what people want you to see. Again, it's that front facing view of the world, and the idea that there would be a rear facing idea doesn't really compute to them all that much, especially if it doesn't fit into their worldview. So you'll get some ideas that the rear facing view is there, but not all of it. And I think it's made worse by the fact that we're given sort of a cosmology, a spiritual cosmology that doesn't fit reality either. So you've got, layers of deception that really start to interlock and create this false reality very, very effectively.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
kind of see ancient Jerusalem as being the Hollywood of its time period. So you're given all of these stories that come to you
Right.
through your ancestral knowledge, and then it's repackaged and branded as a new religious form, right? So you've got in Greek mythology, you've got Musaeus, which is the lawbringer, son of not Orpheus, son of Asclepius, and he's bringing the law to Greece. And then they say, actually, Musaeus is this guy Moses, and he's the law bringer to his people. And what he really said was this about Yahweh. And so they took the ancestral knowledge and the ancestral awareness, repackaged it, and said, it's actually this guy over here. So when you think about Plato's cave, we're given the Plato's cave in the form of Neo and the Matrix and the technological world being this kind of a cave environment. Well,
Yeah.
it's repackaged and rebranded as something else and then handed back to you. That's the power in taking the ancestral knowledge and then redefining it, reapplying it and giving it to you in a completely different way. So all of the prophecies made by our storytellers then become self-fulfilling, because that was kind of the plan all along. That's why it was branded and given to you in that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like they wrote the script in Jerusalem and then finalized it in Alexandria. And then oh yeah, 72 rabbis did it. I don't know if this is certain as far as how old the Garden of Eden story is preceding the Bible, right? There may be elements of it that are older and Sumerian or Babylonian. Excuse my stutter. But the allegory of the cave, of course, precedes the Bible and the Garden of Eden story that we're familiar with. And in that story, like so many other cosmological origination stories, there are the four characters, the four archetypes that actually totally parallel the allegory of the cave. There's Adam, Eve, God, and the snake. And Adam and Eve are both transfixed captives in the garden rather than the cave. But which one frees them and which one is their captor, I'm not sure, right? Because the snake and God, there's different ways to interpret that. Did the snake actually bring them wisdom? Or, was God, their captor all along? But anyway, there's different ways to consider different elements that are in the Garden of Eve story relative to the allegory of the cave. But again, there's the essential four: the feminine, masculine, and godly and anti-godly.
Right. Well, this is the Garden of Eden cylinder seal. And this was a Babylonian seal that they would include with their grains as they would sell them around the world. And so this the cylinder seal has all of the elements here. They called it a banquet motif, right? So this is sort of a vision of the bounty that was coming from this Akkadian empire. And so as they're selling their grain, they label it with this cylinder seal. It was kind of like an advertisement from where you got your grain from. And so this Adam and Eve cylinder seal was in a lot of ways a kind of a advertisement, right? So this is the also known as the temptation seal, a small stone cylinder in the post-Akkadian origin dating from about 2200 to 2100 BC. The seal depicts two seated figures, a tree and a serpent, was formerly believed to evince some sort of connection with Adam and Eve from the book of Genesis. Now is seen as a conventional example of a Akkadian banquet seal. So who was getting their grain from the Akkadian Empire or the Babylonian Empire? Well, probably a lot of people all around the Levant.
Sure.
Right? So as they're writing down this banquet motif as a sort of cultural artifact, this is also made to be the golden age, like we were saying with the banquet. The banquet is with God, right? So as they're feasting on this tree, it's sort of seen as them being there with God, right? So interesting.
It's very interesting. It's a captivating image. I could see, in a world without many images, that this would just spawn off so much imaginative stories in of itself that maybe we don't see necessarily, but just just captivating.
Well, think about cereal boxes. Right?
Exactly.
These are sort of the stories for children. So if you've gotten your grain from the Akkadian Empire, you're going to give your little seal, the advertisement, to your children, and they're going to look at this and be like, "Oh wow, what is this? This is pretty cool."
So that's
exactly
God?
Like
this. It's really a neat. The design, anyway, of it's very reminiscent of the dual pillars and the center idea in the middle, and kind of many different archetypal figures have anyway.
It's quite literally a commercial on the back of a cereal box, right? Because it's the grain that's coming from there. And then that is sort of, it takes hold as this sort of origin point for the world, right? So did you ever see the movie? It was, oh man, I'm blanking on the name, but it was a M. Night Shyamalan movie where this sea nymph gets trapped in a pool, and she has to make her return back into the world of this, the magical world. And they have these archetypes of these different characters, one being the warrior. And he's this dude who thought it would be really cool to like work out one half of his body and not the other. So he's super weak on one side and he's super buff and strong on the other. And so he's like the warrior. And then you've got the priest archetype. And then you've got these other people who are like protectors of this nymph. And so as this storybook creature is entered into their world, they all take on the archetypes that you find in the stories. And what's interesting is they have the prophet archetype, which is this little child who can see the future in the back of cereal boxes. And so he's reading the future he's divining it from the back of these cereal boxes. And so he knows what to do and where these people should be positioned and how the plan should lay out so that they can get this sea nymph back to the magical world that she came from, as all these monsters are appearing around them. So I forgot the name of the movie. Somebody help me out there. Lady in the Water. There we go. That's what it is.
I have not seen that. It sounds fascinating.
It's really
That's
good.
funny.
People kind of hated on it, but I thought it was excellent when it comes to the whole hero's journey thing. It was very round. It has that roundness to it. But again, it has to do with how we see the world and where we place ourselves in the sort of everyday hierarchy of order. We all find a place in that hierarchy of order. It's just, we don't think we necessarily have a choice about it. We kind of fall into these roles instead of making these roles for ourselves. Do you guys want to watch the trailer? I'm sure I could find it here real quick.
Yeah, let's check it out.
Here we go.
Welcome to the Cove. I'm Cleveland Heap. Welcome to the Cove. I hear splashing some nights. Hello? Hey! I saw you! I saw you! Who in the world are you?
You have an animal size.
I don't know who you are, but you did something to my thoughts.
Where are you from?
The blue world.
When the door to her world is opened.
Oh my God.
Others will come through.
What do you think it was? Some kind of dog? Are there any wolves in this area? Hyenas?
An animal that size doesn't just walk around not be seen.
And the fate of this world
Why is she here?
She's trying to save us.
Does man deserve to be saved?
lies in her hands.
What do you see? Cleveland, run!
Did something go wrong? What's happening? I thought it was gonna be safe!
M. Night Shyamalan's Lady in the Water.
How many of you are there?
Yeah, so it's a good movie, worth a watch. I think you would really enjoy it. But yeah.
Yeah, I'll check that out. Those look good. Mermaids and werewolves.
Yep. But the whole idea is, you're sort of stepping into an unknown world, and it's you got to find a way to get back home. And so all of these different characters had their own character arc. And in the movie, M. Night Shyamalan made a specific reference to the movie critics, right? So there was one guy who was a movie critic who was living in this apartment building who gets ripped apart by these monsters as a way of him getting back at them for not liking his films.
That's hilarious.
Right.
Nice.
And again, the Arthurian weave, this is a good point. There is that idea of the Arthurian legends too, because again, they had these formulas to write these stories back then, and it just seems right to people. So a lot of these stories, they have, this appeal, this mass appeal. And so over generations upon generations, people understand what movies or what stories have the most mass appeal based upon their kind of endurance and which stories get told and which stories get forgotten about. And so we're all sort of trying to map each other's brains out. We're trying to map each other's caves out by finding out which stories are the most relatable to the most amount of people. And this is how we come up with things like the hero's journey, is because you can just map out these different changes and how they occur and when they're occurring, and basically come up with the most rounded stories imaginable. And this is what people find very enduring. So
Yeah, and there's this whole archetypal button that they hit too, especially the Matrix, right? It's like there's something at the end of the Matrix. I left feeling like it was synonymous with the Jesus story, and it kind of has that, and all these other hero journey archetypes built into this technological superhero kind of idea, and it hit so many buttons on like the collective consciousness that I think that's why it has become one of these fundamental, like, hundreds of years ago, what the fundamental was the swordsman into the cave, and now the Matrix story has become this fundamental.
right, it's just a different cave, right? The hero never changes, but the cave is always different. And there's this idea too of like having a hero that could be any one of us, like this everyman type character.
Right.
And an interesting parallel to that is like the movies like Office Space, right? You show a clip from Office Space, everybody just instantly knows what it is, even though it wasn't a huge budget, huge smash hit movie, because that guy is so relatable to our everyday lives that he becomes that sort of meme or that archetype of, well, this is how he chooses to escape, how he gets the hell out of there, because the intolerable grind of everyday ordinarity is too much for him to handle, and he makes the mistakes along the way, which is also very relatable. But in some ways you could see the superheroes as being a departure from the everyman, right? They have to continually mog these superheroes, get them further and further down the ladder to try and make them relatable to the everyman, because if you've just got this perfect character, they don't make many Superman movies because it's not that relatable.
Right.
You have to have some sort of anchoring point for the viewer to feel like they can relate to this character, whether they know it or not. And so you can't, which is the problem with the Bible too, is God is this perfect, all powerful being. So you've got to kind of take some of that power away so that the story actually makes sense. This is a problem that people bring up all the time. If God's all powerful, why do people suffer? They have to have the all powerful character to have the ultimate authority. That's why he's all powerful. But in terms of reality, no, everything is a little bit flawed. It's never perfect forms. Even Plato talks about the perfect forms. It's like that's on a different, higher level of being. That actually doesn't relate to you all that much. You're imperfect. You don't have that view of perfection all the time. It's not an easy journey for you. You actually have to struggle. You have to learn. You have to develop. And in a lot of ways, that's sort of, the problem with our two-story understanding of cosmology, the spirit realm of perfection and the human realm of imperfect. Well, that kind of puts us out of touch with the divine, doesn't it? When you bring in this two-story conception, it's a separation. Yes, sure, the spirit realm does exist on some level, but is it all that different from the place that we live now? Is it so far out of touch and out of reach? And we can logic our way into making new perfect spirit realms, but does that mean they exist? Does perfection have to exist on some level for the spirit to exist as an immortal being? And I think it's actually the imperfection of the spirit that teaches the lessons that allows the immortality of spirit to continue. Because if everything was uniform, everything was the same everywhere, nothing would be good. because nothing would be bad. You can't have good without bad. There has to be that contrast there.
Yeah, it reminds me of the the fool story in the tarot card, and like no one wants to be the fool, but everyone can identify with being foolish. And the fool is all of us, and we all are developing into the wizard or the king or whatever. But we're all on the fool's journey, and it wouldn't make sense to us if there weren't mistakes and flaws along the way, right? Like you didn't almost fall off the cliff and then fall off another one or whatever. Like it's just the folly, it leads to the refinement. Reminds me that there's I think Bruce Lee sentiment, but in martial arts idea, the difference between a beginner and a master is that the master has failed every which way possible. That's how you learn not to fail, right? It's all about learning and refining, and there's that cycle again, right? Spiral cycle.
Right. Not everybody spirals out. Some people spiral in, and you could see that in their journey as well. So,
right. Yeah, I guess spiral down. People can spiral down.
Right. The downward spiral is very common.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think? This has been a great episode. We can probably close it up there, but very round. We've got our 4 quadrants. We've returned at the beginning. Hopefully everybody joins us next week, and keep an eye out there for any new articles from Ethan on the Occult Research Institute. He's always writing something. So
we'll see.
Absolutely. And 777 this Tuesday. So check us out. We're going to be going over some more of Aleister Crowley's tarot.
The 777 is epic. You and Nick are doing dope on that.
Well, thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you again next time.
Peace.